cathedral as St. Patrick's was restored by Guinnesses. And there's a photograph of the back of it. And I think it gives you an indication of the sort of higgledy-piggledy way in which houses and things grew up down Fishamble Street. But they're all different shapes and sizes. And look at the width of that house there. It's only one room wide, the shop underneath it. Now you'd hardly recognise the back of the cathedral today from that. But this is just literally across the road from the cathedral. This is coming down Nicholas Street and into Patrick Street. Now all of that area there was bought up by Guinnesses. The cathedral there in the distance was refurbished by Guinnesses. And the whole area there was bought up, knocked down and cleared, because it was literally just a warren of very unhygienic houses, a slum, for want of a better way of putting it. And they built those marvellous big red brick apartments that are still there today, called the Ivy Trust. I don't know exactly what's going on here. There's some kind of roadworks going on in the street. But there's a whole series of these I'm going to show you now, coming down Patrick Street. There's a lot going on there. If you look at that, that's looking up towards St. Patrick's as you come down the street. And that's the corner of Patrick's Close. A whole lot of bills, as you used to call them, posters posted up there. If we had time, we'd read them all. But there's two donkeys and carts here in the foreground. And I'll just show you those. It's been determined that that jumper is holding a duck. But if you just have a look at this thing up on the wall here, you might take to hazard a guess at what that is. Because it's number 29 Patrick Street.
Shape, is it?
No, it's not. I thought it was a figurehead. That was a tobacconist. I looked it up in the Tom's directories, and what that actually is a cigar store Indian of the type that the American tobacco companies used to make and give out to customers. I can't remember, now it's gone out of my head, the name of the tobacconist, but the tobacconist it was, and if you just have a look at it there, you can see where the stand is still on it, where it would have stood on the ground, and it's just been put up there as a sign. And I'd love to know, does it still survive? Probably not. There's a lot going on, as I say, in the street. There are various descriptions of Patrick Street back in the day. One by Charles Dickens, and it's utterly appalling to read what he wrote. And another by an American journalist that I found when he climbed up to the tower and described what he saw down below, the squalor. Apparently one side of the road was really obvious, fish and vegetables sold, and the other side was mostly confined to selling second-hand clothing that you can see here. You just have a look at this pub here. It's very interesting. That says John McCall, a lady selling fish here. The barrels outside. Now John McCall was a famous character. He was a county councillor. He was a folklorist, a songwriter and a poet. But his son was more famous. His son was P.J. McCall, who took over the pub from him. Now, P.J. McCall was a famous songwriter who wrote Bull the Vogue, Follow Me Up to Carlow, a whole lot of songs like that. Kelly the Boy from Killaan. He was also corporation councillor, and James Connolly stood against him in 1902, and he rallied the forces of the church against Connolly, all of the sodalities and all, and he described Connolly as a godless communist, and he beat Connolly by a ratio of about 5 to 1. Some ladies there selling fish. Shawty women. You frequently see these ghost images in some of these glass plate photographs, because if anything moved while the photograph has been taken, it comes out as a sort of a blur. Now, this is very interesting. There's hens pecking in the street here. Look, there's still there, one up there. And I'm given to understand that that cart is what was known as a night soil cart. Apparently, if you weren't connected to the sewer that went into the puddle there, you could leave your stuff out, your night soil, in a box mixed with the ashes that you did the cooking on. It would be collected by these carts. It was brought up to a field in Dolphin's Barn that's still there. It's a playing field now that runs from the barn over to Clogger Road, and was stored there. It was owned by the corporation. And apparently the smell of it, we smelled for miles around. And farmers from County Dublin would then come along and take away cartloads at a very cheap price and spread it on the land as manure. That's why you see a lot of the detritus of everyday life, like bits of broken crockery and bits of pipes and oyster shells and stuff like that in the soil around South County Dublin. I do believe that there is a policeman keeping a watching brief there, Ken, a DMP man keeping an eye on, probably from Kevin Street around the corner, keeping an eye on things there.
That type of truck or a horse cart, that was used in the 40s for collecting the bins, certainly around.
Yeah, probably out of the same stables, literally. That's just a picture of Patrick's Close, one end of which we saw there with the hoardings on it. But you can see that's they be all gone. There's not a single example of that left in Dublin now. These were buildings with a strong Huguenot influence, with a gable front on them, like that. They're known as Dutch Billies, and quite a lot of study has been done on those. Mostly three-storey, of mostly Huguenot influence. And I'm going to show you a load of photographs now of I suppose the senior side of Dublin. Nobody even bothered to put the addresses on the back of these or on them at anywhere, because they didn't probably seem important enough. A lot of slum dwellings. As far as I know, I think most of them were taken at the behest of Dr. Cameron, who was the city health officer, who was appalled at the conditions in which the poor lived and at the outbreaks of disease that there was among children and adults. You had scarlatina, scarlet fever, diphtheria. He campaigned vigorously to have public housing built, both by the Dublin Corporation and by the artisans' dwellings. And as far as I know, this series of photographs here are in connection with that, but they have a few things in common. You'll generally see one tap in the middle of them. Now, these were mostly courts. These weren't the sort of tenements that were in big houses. Now, God knows there was enough of those in places like Summerhill and around what is now Sean McDermott Street, but these were places that were tucked in at the back of bigger housing estates, and an awful lot of them were purpose-built in their day to exploit the poor. They were built by people who were wealthy and lived in big houses and simply wanted to get as much money as they could out of these small dwellings. They were mostly known as courts. As I say, I don't know where they are, but just the one thing that's common in them all is that most of the kids are going around on their bare feet in them. There's a fairly decent looking slating job has been done on that one, I have to say. But there you can see, now these boxes, it may well possibly be that these were for that soil I was telling you about. I can see no other useful function for them, and the one pump in the middle. A great many of them have a sort of an open sewer down the middle of them. It's pretty appalling looking at it. That's slightly cut down. The roof on that is, I wonder, it must have been leaking like a sieve. That'd be fairly typical now of the courts that were purpose-built, because they were built back to back. There would have been another house on the far side of that, with another lane and another on the far side of that. And they were literally only little two-room cottages. And a lot of them had this feature of this central drain going into God knows where, maybe a cesspit or maybe into a sewer, which were few in number. Another one there. And you'll see that there's a pump up that end and a gas lamp. You'll frequently see a gas lamp in them also. As I say, I'd love to know where they were.
There's a good few around Francis Street now.
Oh, absolutely. They were all over the city, Christy. They were everywhere. I think that building is still, I think that's down near off Cork Street, near what is used to be Brown Street and Chamber Street. But look at the houses, how small they are, and the state of the roads. Now, not all of the roads were actually cobbled with cobblestone. Some of them were just compacted gravel and would turn into mush, a mixture of mush and horse dung when it rained, and they were churned up by carts. Now these are fairly substantial looking houses here, yet you have this awful squalid looking place tucked in behind. You know, now these are the other type of tenements I was telling you about. These were originally very high status houses in Georgian times in Summerhill. And this was a sort of a warren of coach houses and stables and houses for the various retainers that would have been involved with them, like, you know, people who looked after horses, and all of those were occupied as well. But you'll frequently hear reference being made in these type of tenements up here, a two-pair front and a two-pair back. I think that simply meant a room that had two windows on it. You would have had several families perhaps living in the one room. in a lot of these. Again, a lot of barefoot children here, you know. That looks familiar now, I just cannot put a finger on it. But again, you have, look, you've one of these gable-fronted houses. So I imagine it's probably somewhere around the Liberties.
Looks like Marvin, eh?
I don't think it's quite Marylebone Lane, but it's, you're heading down towards the Liberties, I would imagine. So that gable-fronted house was a feature of that area, because that's where a lot of the Huguenots settled. These have two things running down the middle of the street. They probably the ruts from cart wheels going up and down. God knows how long. Bare feet. A few children doing a bit of washing with a washing board. And I think that's a more modern picture. I think that's probably around Cuff Street in the 1950s. At least all the children have shoes on them there, but it's still pretty squalid looking. That's unbelievable what people were walking around in their bare feet there. And that's absolutely horrific. And a child there with his foot bandaged up, probably after getting an infection in his foot by virtue of having no shoes on him. When I was a kid, there was a thing called the Herald Boot Fund. Now, I've never actually seen anyone in their bare feet when I was young, but nevertheless I know it to have existed, that the Herald had a boot fund for buying shoes, as one councillor, shoes for footless children. Some famous ignoramus of a corporation councillor. Children, well, at least they're clothed, but their clothes look perhaps as if they're in need of a wash, like themselves. A lot of barefoot children there. That's, again, in Dr. Cameron's thing, his reports that he said there were accompanying photographs of a lot of tenement houses. This was one of them there, and I'm almost sure that's where it came from. I'm just going to show you two more photographs now. Just see if there's anyone out who the people are. Because we're on the last two slides now. Well, three actually. I'll show you a third one. Does anybody know who that is? Yeah. You know. Anybody? No, he was a singer.
Joseph Lowe.
No, Dermot Troy. And the reason I said because he lived right across the road from my wife Barbara. He tragically died in 1934. Or not 1934. In the 60s, but he was only 34 when he died. And most beautiful, I actually heard him singing in Cashel Road. And who's this? On the bottom right hand side of this picture, who is it? Nick O'Reilly. Yeah, that's apparently the staff of the Royal Jimmy Campbell, yeah, and the bouncer that used to be on the door. I'll just finish off with this one here because I only rediscovered this. We spoke about this before, Malachy Horden's grave. I only found the photographs yesterday of his grave up in Sagard Graveyard, over against the wall. On the left hand side as you go in, and those are photographs from his book. So as I said, we'll have to have a part two or maybe even a part three. Thank you very much.
Just before you go anywhere at all, just draw your attention to, you see there we have our banner here designed, and you see it featured in the slideshow just presented to us. Any questions in relation to any of the photographs seen there tonight?
Fuka Bridge, is that still there?
Oh yeah, that's pretty much there. Now, the dam has been built just above it.
Right.
It was a very fine waterfall or a cataract, whatever, before they built the dam. I actually have a couple of photographs of the dam I should have stuck being built. But there's literally only a trickle of water coming down through it nowadays from the dam, cover spill on the dam. But myself and a friend walked all up through it years ago when we moved up here first, and we found a section of small railway track. We were wondering, was it from the Dublin to Blessington steam tram, or was it a little railway that they perhaps used when they were building the dam? It was thrown down into the gorge anyway, and it was all built. We should have got a hacksaw and cut a piece off.
The Constitution you know that building?
Yeah.
Can you, what's the history of that, or what? Was it built purposely?
Oh, it was purpose built, yeah. Before the repeal movement bought up the adjoining properties to the Corn Exchange, the frontage of which is still there. And they used to hold their meetings, the repeal meetings, in the Corn Exchange building. but it wasn't always suited because there was other meetings going on there. So they had quite a considerable income coming in from O'Connell's rent, as they called it, the repeal rent. They had quite a good turnover, so they bought the adjoining buildings and built it from the ground up as Conciliation Hall. And it was knocked down. It was still there substantively, had been added on to when the Irish press offices were there. And then it was ultimately knocked down to make way for the modern Irish press office, and subsequently a big office block there or something like that. Now, no traces now left as far as I know.
You haven't got any more of the court ones, have you?
Sorry?
Have you many more of the court?
Well, there are a good few more. I just took
where would I kind of find them?
a good few of them. Well, I've been gathering them up from all sorts of places, you know. Some friends of mine in the Royal Society of Antiquaries of Ireland gave me some of them.
Oh, did they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like you can use them for this purpose here, but you wouldn't be able to publish them, you know, because they'd be copyrighted to whoever owns them. You know, and the same with the National Library stuff.
No, it's just where St. Patrick's Park is now. That used to be a
Yeah,
slaughterhouse and a
well,
court.
you see the place where that tobacconist sign was?
Yeah.
That's exactly where Patrick's Park is now.
Really?
Yeah.
There was
But that was all just level.
There
But
was-
in behind those buildings, you would have had all kinds of courts.
There was slaughterhouses there.
Oh, everything, yeah. Up back lanes was not too long ago.
That's why
In Francis Street, they had them. Sorry. Oh, yeah.
Are you finished answering the lady?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
When did the Irish newspaper start to use photographers? Or is that another
Yeah,
story?
no, I tell you, I've been looking at photographs. I've been looking at newspapers for a hell of a long time. Around about 1900, I think, was the first time I ever saw photographs. In 1895, there was, and it was a big thing because there was a little newspaper called Illustrograph came out, and it was like a smaller version of the Illustrated London News, and their sort of big selling point was that they had photographs in it, you know, because you didn't have, only very, very odd time you'd get, they kind of crept in under the door from about that time onwards. From about, you know, by 1910 now, 1905, 1910, there's still lots of them. I'd say, just at a guess now, I'd say the first of them would have been around 1900. Oh, yeah?
Is Malky Horton's house still there?
I've never been able to find where it is.
Yeah, there's just the north wall of the house and the dairy building.
Yeah, is it really? No,
That's what's
I first heard about Malachy Horton. My father's foreman knew him because his wife was related to him in some way, and she was from up around Jobstown. And he told me that he often met Malachy when he was up courting the wife, and he was telling me about him when I was a young lad, you know, and he told me about this book, Malachy Horton Remembers. So back in about the 1960s, I got a copy of it. I paid 5 guineas for it, £5, 5 shillings, in, remember the bookshop used to be in Nassau Street? Hannah's are one of those.
Greens.
No, it wasn't the one, it was the one before Greens, and I still have it. And it's a first edition. But I just happened to be talking to somebody from publishers one day down in Cork, who subsequently brought out, and I told them about the book, Malachy Horton Remember. They were very interested, and a couple of months later they brought it out in paperback. But first editions of it are still fairly uncommon. But as I said, by the time I moved up to Tulla, I was familiar with the story of Malachy Horton, and I went up Jobstown Lane looking to see could I find it. I could never spot it.
It's right up the top.
Is it at the very top? Yeah.
Very top.
Yeah. Apparently, Joe Porter, the man who was my father's foreman, told me that Malachy wasn't averse to selling a few whoppers, you know. And apparently, he told Dr. George Little, who wrote the book, a few things that he knew he wanted to hear, you know, and that he was being plied with strong drink down in the Jobstown End quite a bit, you know. And George Little, from what I've heard from people who knew him in the old Dublin Society, told me that he never let anything as trivial as the facts get in the way of a good story.